the most important thing, again, is that you have a model and you take action. Now, that begs the question, how much action should you take, right? How much action should you take? How much action is a reasonable amount to take? So there's a lot of different ideas of this. There's one model that just says, like, go out as much as you possibly can, right? You know, bang the drums, go out like 7 days a week, all day, every day, quit your job, do game exclusively. By the way, this is not me giving advice. This is I don't want anybody like, Todd said, quit your job. Like, it is true Todd just said that, but that was not Todd's advice, okay? Yeah, he's writing, he said, quit job. Make no money, live on street. And that's kind of ridiculous. And I've actually had guys like ask me, this is the dumbest question I've ever been asked, maybe. Should I quit college to focus on game? Take a minute and think about that question. Like, you're in literally the best environment for game that's ever existed, and you're like, should I quit that to go just focus on game full time? No, don't do that. Now, it sounds like doing more game is good. And to an extent it is, and certainly over periods it is. But if you do so much game that you get burnt out, or if you do so much game that you start to just go through the motions and do the same thing over and over again without thinking about it, that's not good. Also, if you do so much game that you start to hate game, it's not good either, right? Game should be fun. There's this old adage, they say there's a reason why they call it the game and not the work, right? If you turn it too much into work, that's not a good thing either. So I had a period of time where I basically went out literally 7 nights a week, actually not kidding, 7 nights a week for basically almost 2 years straight. And for the first 6 months of this period, my game absolutely skyrocketed. It got really, really, really good. And then for the next 18 months, I basically did anything and everything I could to not go out. Because it was too much, I was over it, I was stale, and my game actually got worse, right? You have to be careful about that. Another story of a similar thing, my first wingman I ever had in my entire life, he had given himself a mission because he was dedicated, he was committed to game. He had given himself a mission every single day. He was going to do 12 approaches a day. Every single day, no matter what. And this was a dedicated dude. This was a dude that had been his parents had come over as immigrants from India and driven work ethic into him like nobody's business ever. And he had worked so hard, he graduated high school 2 years early. He went to a good engineering school and finished top of his class. He was the guy that will if he says he'll do something, he'll fucking do it, right? And when he said he'll do his 12 approaches a day, he meant it. If he got to the end of the day and he hadn't done his 12 approaches, he would go to the fucking bus stop and go approach some old lady at the bus stop, or he'd go to the Dunkin' Donuts at 4 a.m. and hope that he'd go talk to the person serving donuts and coffee at 4 a.m. He would find some way somehow to do his 12 approaches a day, no matter what, every single day, right? Now, how good do you think that guy got in a year of doing this? He did it for literally a year before I met him. How good do you think he got at?
Very good.
Very good? You think so?
Yeah.
Nah, he sucked. He was terrible. Terrible. The entire by the end of that year, he was a virgin. He hadn't had a kiss the entire year, right? Now, he could have gotten good. It's not like doing all that approaches made him not get good. But the thing was, he was just focused on his goal was making game hard, right? Doing the hard part of game, which is mustering the time, finding the energy to just do the approach. He was basically treating game like lifting rocks at a quarry rather than painting art on a canvas, right? He was doing the hard part but not the difficult part, right? And so what he ended up doing is he would go out and do his 12 approaches, and basically he would give the same shtick, the same opener, the same follow-up over and over again, because he was just focused on this idea that if I just do the approaches, I'll get good. And what he did is he did the approaches the same way over and over again, and he just developed bad habits. He just developed a habit of doing the same approach over and over, right? Now, he did get some good things out of it. Number one, this guy you think you're an approach machine? You have not, this guy literally, he was the ultimate approach machine. So that he had that going for him, absolutely. He had absolutely no fear of anything, right? And he was willing to basically try anything. And he was so bought in and committed, he would go to the walls. But his actual game was not very good at the time. Fortunately, he met me. I wasn't the world's best at the time or anything like that, but he met me and I actually had a little bit more of an idea of what was going on. And I basically made him start thinking about what he's doing. I made him start doing some different things on his open. I made him actually start, this is truly, truly dumb. He was going out 12 approaches a day. When he did get numbers, he wasn't even hardly following up on them. How dumb is that? When you're talking about dumb procedures. Anyway, I made him follow up on his numbers. I made him actually show more man to woman in his approaches. different things like that. Within 2 months, his first month, he lost his virginity when we were wings. His second month, he had his second time having sex, which was actually a threesome, which is super weird, like for that to be your second time having sex, right? So he had a lot going for him. He'd learned a lot from it, but he was fundamentally doing things wrong. And doing more of the wrong thing is not going to get you the right result, right? It's not just how much heavy lifting of rocks you do. It's can you get like, a chisel or a tool to make your work more efficient, right? Can you do something smart instead of working hard all the time, okay? So just going out for the sake of going out is not the right approach. And certainly going out without analysis is not good. What you need to get good at game is a combination. You need a combination of time in field and just experience, like raw data, raw experience, and then analysis and adjustment. It's essentially the scientific method. You need to run experiments, then you need to think about them, right? And probably in science, you spend more time thinking about the experiments than running them. In game, it's not that way. In game, you should spend a lot of time running experiments. You should spend a lot of time in the field. But I suggest that each and every in-field session, you do at least a little bit of thought, a little bit of breakdown in between, right? And my students for this weekend will know this, or anybody who's been on long programs with me will know this. But basically the way I recommend doing a debrief in general, if you want to do a quick, effective debrief, ask yourself what were your best approaches of the night? What were your biggest challenges of the night or day or whatever? What are your biggest takeaways, right? But you need to be evaluating that. What went well? What went poorly? What can I take away? And by the way, best approach when you're doing this does not necessarily mean that it went the best. So it could be that there was this girl who has a really challenging approach, big group of guys and girls, you didn't know how to do it, you were so intimidated, you did it anyway, and you got at least to get in a one-on-one conversation with the girl at some point. That could be a massive accomplishment, and that could be your best approach, even if you, like the next second got blown out by her boyfriend, right? It might not be the one that went the best, but it was the best approach for you and your learning or what you needed to achieve, right? So best doesn't mean it necessarily went the best. Or there could be a girl that just comes up to you and says like, oh my God, I love you, can we dance? Maybe that was your best approach in terms of attraction, but you didn't really do anything. So maybe that wasn't actually your best approach for the night. Although, you should at least consider that it might be. You can say like, did I do something to make her approach me? Is it something I can repeat? Can I get girls to do this more often? So you should at least think about it. But if you didn't have a lot of volition, it may not be actually qualified. And then when you ask what are your biggest challenges do not mean your worst sets. Let's say you have a girl that you spend the entire night with, you get drinks with her, you make out with her, you get in an Uber with her, you get back to her place, and you get dropped at her doorstep and can't talk your way into her apartment. Your biggest challenge of the night might be, how do I get from the doorstep into the apartment, even though that also might be your best set of the night, right? So you want to think about those when you're evaluating. And then the most important is, what are your biggest takeaways? What is, if you can improve one thing for the next time you go out, what is the one thing you'd like to improve? What is the one thing you'd like to work on, right? And then I suggest working on that one thing, maybe the next time you go out, maybe a time you go out soon if you're already working on some other stuff, etc. Also though, you don't want to be revamping your game entirely. Each time when you go out, you want to do mostly what has worked for you already, mostly what is your best game, has the best chance of result, and then maybe 10% the new stuff you're trying to try out and tweak, right? If you try and like overhaul your game every single day, you're just going to have this inconsistent, chaotic set of results. It's going to be very frustrating. It's not going to be rewarding at all. And also, even when you're trying out the new stuff, you're not trying it out in a good environment. You want to be trying out the new stuff in an environment of what you already know works, in an environment that already suits your personality, right? So be willing to take small, consistent change. Small, consistent, steady improvement. That's what we're really looking for, okay? All right, so back to the general gist of like, how often should you go out? So going out 7 nights a week or all day, every day or whatever is way too much. You're probably actually asking to become stale if you're doing that much, okay? You wanna go out as much as you possibly can without ruining the rest of your life, number one. Don't lose your job, don't lose all your friends, don't get in like awful health, all that kind of stuff. So number one, don't ruin your life. Number two, you should still be a little bit excited when you go out. Just a little bit, excited or nervous. If you're new to game, nervous counts as excited. All right, but you want to be at least to the point where it still feels fresh and still feels interesting. You're still excited about it. If you start to be like, oh, this again, and you start like, especially if you loved game and then you start hating game. If you notice you went from loving it to hating it, that means you're overdoing it or you're doing it wrong, one or the other. But it means you need to stop and think about what's going on, right? Related. My dad, who has a great influence in my life, he was a coach of a lot of things when I was a kid. One of the things he coached was wrestling. He was a coach state championship teams in wrestling. And he had this thing he would do. If he noticed one of his wrestlers who had been performing was suddenly underperforming, like they kind of had it and then they seemed to have lost it, he would ask them the question. He'd say, how are the girls looking these days? These are like high school level wrestlers. So like hopefully they like girls, or hopefully they're into girls and whatnot. And if they were enthusiastic about like, the girls are looking good, dating's looking good, they're hot, etc., then he was like, okay, they're good. This is a healthy young animal right now, right? But if they started to like be kind of like, whatever, they weren't liking it, then he would take that as a sign that they physically were overtraining, right? Maybe they need to ease off a little bit, maybe they're overdoing it a little bit, right? And that's obviously with a physical thing, but it's the same thing in game. If you start to notice that you thought the girls were all hot and you were excited about it going out, and then you start going out and you're like, these girls suck, these girls aren't hot, maybe you're overdoing game a little bit. It's possible you need to step back. Now, if you're going out once a month and you're like, these girls aren't hot, you're just making excuses, all right? That's just bullshit. But if you are going out over and over and over again and you're starting to feel that malaise, it's too much. It's too much, all right? It needs to be fun. It's not about total amount of effort you put in. It's about the amount of quality effort you put in. How many quality sets do you put in where you're actually like bringing your soul to it, so to speak, in a weird way of saying it? How much of that are you doing? And then are you actually analyzing it afterwards? Are you actually going through it and improving and learning from it? If you're doing those things, you're doing it right. If you're just lifting rocks at a quarry, if you're just doing sets to do sets, if you're doing the hard work, not the difficult work, you're not doing it right. All right, but that said, minimum you need to do though, is you need to do it enough that it feels like it's a part of your life and it starts to feel like it's a habit, right? So typically I would recommend at least 3 times a week if you possibly can. They don't have to be long, right? If you go out 3 times a week and some of those are just half an hour, that's absolutely fine. It's just important that it be frequent enough that it starts to feel like a habit, right? And I would recommend when you do go out, at least try and do 3 approaches, because if you do fewer than that, whenever you go out, what's your hardest approach? It's the first one, right? So if you try and go out, there's some people that say just do 1 approach every day, which sounds great as a plan, except that every single day you're going to do the hardest approach of that day only. You're going to give yourself no momentum, and it's just not smart. It's not smart to make it that hard on yourself. But I like 3. 5 is also good if you want to make a slightly higher standard for yourself. But the point is, with that number, you're able to build some level of momentum. You're able to be like, the first one was hard, next one a little bit less hard, third one, okay, I got this, right? And the nice thing with doing 3, or better yet, even 5, is if you said you're going to do 1 approach every day, you'll probably do this 1 terrifying approach, and then be like, God, that sucked, I'm done, right? If you do 3, you're likely to build some kind of momentum, and oftentimes instead of doing 3, you'll do 5 or 7, or you'll actually get in the flow and you'll get some momentum and it'll feel good. The other important thing with 3 is you get some kind of a sample size, so your entire daily ego is not based on the reaction of 1 girl. We don't want that, right? It's like, I'm going to get blown out by 1 girl and then I'm going to ruminate about it for the entire day until I do my next approach tomorrow. That's not good. We don't want that either. What I gave you is a minimum. Obviously, you can do more than that, and it's obviously good. And you can certainly go for certain periods where you go very, very intensely, right? Like when we're doing boot camp this weekend, we're doing a lot more than 3 approaches a day. You know what I mean? Or like on an immersion, same thing. It's a 7-day period, but we're doing a ton more than 3 approaches for that period. That's a very intense period. But I wouldn't expect someone to sustain that pace. Like guys on boot camp, is it a little tiring? A little bit? Yeah. I wouldn't expect you to sustain that pace for life. It might be a little much if you did that day after day after day after day, right? And then you'd be me, right? So you don't want to necessarily do that. Thank you. Yes, you'd be washed up like me. But so in general, in order to get through your excuses, right, having a plan helps a lot. If you have made a commitment to yourself, that also helps with your excuses. If you've made the commitment that I'm going to do 3, that's why having a plan like 3 approaches a day, 3 times a week is important, because you have a measurable way of saying, I fulfilled my commitment to myself. I did the minimum. And then you can look in the mirror and feel good about yourself. You can be like, hey, I'm proud of myself, I did it. Because the one thing I will also say about my friend who did the 12 approaches a day for a year straight, he may not have gotten particularly great at game. Well, his opening got okay, but he didn't get good at much else. But the one thing is, throughout that entire period, because he at every moment thought what he was doing was right? He had the commitment, he had the belief, and he was doing from a position of self-esteem what he thought was right. So every single day throughout that year, after he did his 12 approaches that day, he could look himself squarely in the eye and be like, I'm proud of you. I like the person I see in the mirror right now. I like what I'm doing. Right? And that's absolutely an important part of all this as well, right? Is you to be able to say, look, I think I'm doing the right thing, and I'm sticking to it, and I believe in myself, I care about myself enough to do it. But again, having a game plan definitely helps make everything easier. Because if you're going out there without a plan, like imagine being like sent to war without a gun, right? Or without a weapon. Just like you're just gonna go out there, you figure it out when you get there, like what the fuck is this? right? Having a plan, having an idea, having some kind of mission for yourself definitely helps to make it a lot more focused, a lot more meaningful, and also a lot easier, right? Because again, when you have a specific thing where I'm trying to achieve this thing, well then regardless of the girl's reaction, regardless of what happens, you can always say, you know what, I did the thing I wanted to do. I stepped up in the way I wanted to step up, and regardless of outcome, regardless of even results in game, regardless of even improvements, I can still be happy with and proud of myself. And that's actually a huge part of game, because a lot of game is, how do you feel about yourself? Do you feel worthy? Do you feel enough? Do you like yourself, right? And so anything you can do that helps with that is absolutely going to help as well. Yeah, cool.